So I'm just so grateful that I got to watch some of the presentations beforehand. I got up really early this morning. It's a little after 8:30 here in North Carolina. I loved what Willie was sharing about how to use an agile mindset in schools, accompanied by tools. I'm going to share something a little different than what he shared about being able to create something new outside of the conventional schooling system is what I did. I'll share a little bit about my personal journey to start. I've been working with kids for maybe 20 years now. I went to University of Maryland to get my teaching degree, and I actually had a really progressive education experience in college. I had this math professor who would show us videos of kids before they went into a conventional school setting, trying to solve math problems, and how the kids would, logically think about a math problem. And then he would show videos of the same children after 1 year of schooling who lost that logic and instead would be, saying things like, well, my teacher says I put this number here, after the introduction of some algorithms. And so this professor helped me rethink how to learn math for myself and then how to teach math to kids. And, we had this math text that I still use currently now that it's by John Vanderwall, and he wrote in there, delay the teaching of algorithms to children. They need a lot of time to explore base 10 number systems. And this stuff, really spoke to me. And I left with my degree and started teaching fifth grade in a public school, really excited to bring these ideas that I've learned in college to the public school setting. I taught in Maryland for a couple of years and then in North Carolina when I moved here. And what I found was that it really wasn't possible for me to use any of these ideas that I wanted to use for, just kind of like innovative instructional practices with kids. And instead, I had to follow, the lesson plans, follow the books given, and it had me questioning, why did I even need to get an education degree? And I saw that a lot of, teachers hired were coming from, other degrees, and that the system's set up so that the education is standardized, so everyone can receive the same type of education. But it's really not innovative or creative. I had a principal who wanted to see in the fifth grade hallway, each teacher, she wanted to be able to walk in the hallway and go to one classroom and see the first part of a lesson and go to the next classroom and see the second part of the delivery of the lesson, and so on as she walked around. And so it kind of felt like, a little too scripted. And what I also realized is that the longer I stayed in that system, it was just frustrating me and more so changing me than I was creating any change to it. So after several years, I left and joined a private school startup. This was a small private Quaker school. And, over the 3 years I was there, we only had 3 staff members, me and 2 other people. And we grew it from 6 kids to 17 kids. And there's where I really got my start in playing around with different ideas for how to teach kids. And I could actually start using some of the things that I learned in college to apply with the kids, for example, especially around math. I took all the parents in one day or one evening, and I taught them how to do algorithms in base 7 so they could add and subtract and solve problems in the base 7 number system. But then when I laid out 24 popsicle sticks, and I said, in base 7, not 24 in base 10, I said, who can count out 24 popsicle sticks? And none of the parents wanted to come up, and they all kind of froze. A lot of people had some math trauma. And I explained to them, if you don't want to come up here in front of these other parents and count 24 popsicle sticks base 7 because you're feeling nervous, think about how, your kids feel, and when they don't have time to just explore the base 10 number system and have all that spaciousness without the pressure of learning an algorithm. And so those parents gave me permission to, experiment with some of my ideas in that small private school. And there, I also just started, reading other things like Alfie Cohen, Punished by Rewards, and started expanding, my own educational research around best practices to use with children, exploring nonviolent communication, how to get the kid, how to like, create culture with the kids. And then that ultimately what I decided to do was leave and start my own school. So I opened up the school that I'm running now, ALC Mosaic, in 2013. And we started with 12 students. And eventually I met Thomas Parker, who started the first ALC and turned my school into one. Really loves, the tools and practices that were incorporated to shift. I'm not sure if all of you have heard of like democratic free schools or Sudbury schools. There's Summerhill in England. I don't know if you've heard of that, but where the kids have a lot of freedom and a lot of autonomy. And what ALC kind of does is allows for that self-direction and the autonomy, but incorporates some of the tools that Lily touched on earlier, some of the agile mindsets that Willie was talking about into the daily life of students. So I've been doing this with the kids here for the past 10 years. In 2014, Thomas and I launched an ALF summer program. That's how I met Lily. She came to one of our summer programs, and we now have ALCs are spread out around the world. There's either they're either like micro schools or homeschool collectives, but groups of people who are wanting to create something outside of the conventional education system. And I really think that it's important to have both of these. Like, I really love seeing what Willie was doing in the classroom. I know of some other people who've come through our programs who teach in different schools who just try to put the agile mindset and some of the tools into their own daily classroom practice. And also, I think that it's important that we have other micro schools like mine or others, starting to develop so that we can get more credibility and validity. And the more that we exist and the longer we exist, the more I see the conventional setting change, because they can actually take the data from what we're doing, or get people who are working outside of the system who actually have the creative freedom to implement the changes and use all of the tools that we want to use without the restrictions of standardized testing or being different criteria or pressures that might be put on in a conventional setting, to see what we can do and then learn from that. So that's just an exciting thing for me to see happening in the classrooms and outside of the conventional setting. So I'll shift the next part of what I'll shift to after sharing briefly the history of Mosaic starting. I'll just share some quick stats and then some pictures of some things that we have of the ALC and some kids here, and kind of just share like what's possible outside of conventional education. Again, we started with 12 students in 2013. We had 24 by the June of 2014. Doubled in size and grew really quickly. And now Mosaic, we have around, I think around 90 students. So, I don't know if we're defined quietly as a micro school now, but we keep, 90 is about the max that we can hold with our campus and the building space that we have. So let me share my screen, and I'll just talk a little bit about some of what has been possible here at this Agile Learning Center, just kind of working outside of the system completely. This. Okay, so can everyone see this? Good.
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'll just go through some pictures and some slides. One thing is around literacy instruction that has been really exciting for me to see here. And Waldorf schools, they'll usually hold off literacy instruction until 7, and that's just so that kids can really have that protected time to just engage in the world and think on their own. And you can look up Waldorf schools and learn more about that. But I think that I'm not really into saying kids should learn at any particular time. I think that if a child wants to learn to read at 3, that's wonderful, and they can do that. But what I think can be harmful to children is when they are comparing themselves to others, when they're not maybe ready at 5 to read or 6 to read. or at even 7 to read, that they, lack, confidence, or they just kind of feel dumb when they're like sitting and seeing, what someone else can do. Instead, I operate from the mindset that like every reading is a basic skill that you really need to have to be able to exist in today's world. And for kids, that's reading their video games, or reading a book, or reading, a caption on screens, on a show or something, and reading signs. And they all will want to read. What I love seeing is that, outside of the conventional school system, you can just see that spaciousness for reading to happen whenever the child is ready. If they're getting 10 or a little bit older, we might step in and, provide a little more extra support. But what I've seen is that most kids are really motivated, to read before then. I love seeing multi-age reading groups, the kids supporting each other. Usually we have like older kids helping younger kids. You've seen the picture above. There's a 7-year-old reading a book, and that's a 10-year-old next to her, helping her and sounding out the words. In the back, we've got a 7 and an 8-year-old. The 8-year-old's helping the 7-year-old read. There is something kind of magical to allowing kids to learn to read around 7, who aren't maybe ready to read at 5, but are at 7. They have more context of the world, and they use that context to, it's to go beyond just the phonetics of sounding out the letters, and they can use the whole picture of that to learn to read. I also love in that bottom picture, that's actually in the red shirt, that's my son. He's 5, and he really likes to come to the reading groups here. The little young girl next to him is 7, and she just started learning to read this September and has been so motivated and so excited that she's now she was going over all the different letter sounds with him. And I love being able to just have so much flexibility around that, and that the kids get so much joy from learning something and then immediately going in and teaching it to other kids. And I also have witnessed here, some kids, they just learn to read on their own. I was talking to one of the 13-year-olds here the other day about how he learned to read, and he just said he picked up a book one day and he just decided he wanted to read at school, and just taught himself to read. I don't really know how, and that doesn't happen, I would say, in most situations, but in some it really can, and we have the spaciousness for a kiddo to do that. I think he said he was around 8 when he just did that on his own. And for him, that process was really easy, and he might have been a kiddo in a conventional setting that if he was forced to learn, earlier than that, he might have had more resistance, or had been, had more like reading problems, or, things like this, that, that natural process was really a lot healthier for him. I talked about math and that math professor that I had in college, and I use that text that he gave me in college to this day all the time. That game on the left is this target game that's directly from the book. And I just love the spaciousness to be able to present math in so many different creative ways with mixed ages, and the time to stay where developmentally appropriate for each one. And seeing, that a lot of times, here's like a Monopoly game here. A lot of times, so many math skills can be learned through playing games. What I've found is that kids who have left this school around 10, 11, 12 years old, and decided that they wanted to go to a conventional school, which does happen a lot, in that, kids will want access to a big theater program or sports team or something that we can't offer. One thing that I've seen is that those kids who leave, when they talk about these math skills, and you've got all these when I taught in public schools, it was, you had to meet these standards and that standards, and what my experience was is that each year they forgot what was learned the year before, and you have to keep reteaching and reteaching and reteaching. Is that when a kid is ready, they learn things so much faster, and you only have to tell them one time, and there's not a lot of repetition needed. And the kids who end up leaving here, what I've noticed is they might have 3 to 6 months of tutoring, and then they're able to enter the grade level in 6th, 7th, 8th grade or 9th grade in the conventional school, and they're completely caught up to their peers. And their parents come back to me with these reflections of, this is so amazing. My child had a childhood, and they were able to learn, about numeracy and exploring the world, and they had all these other skills that they were able to learn about cooperation and, curiosity and keeping who they are intact. And they are so much more self-assured. And then they enter this other system and they just needed a couple months of tutoring to catch up. The parents' reflection is like, what were those, what have those other kids been being put through, sitting in desks, all day long for all their childhood years? Well, my child just got to play and, be in this environment where they could have a lot of autonomy and learn to trust themselves and others. And then they could catch up in a few months. Like this is, I think that's something that is really telling, another thing that I love is defining competition on our own terms. One agile tenet that we have for ALCs, one of the roots is people learn more from the situation they're in than what the context is actually being taught. So a kid, you may be in a classroom and you may be trying to teach some subject area, but what the culture of what they're immersed in is what they're really learning, that I have to be better than the person next to me, or I need to get the A in this class. My value is tied up in how well I can produce, or how much I can produce, and how good of a grade I can get. Or I'm on a sports team and and I have to beat the other team. That's the most important thing to do. Our team has to win. And here we get to define all of that on our own terms. I think that a little competition, people like that. The competition can push you to want to be better. But if it comes at the expense of other people, that's where it can get a little unhealthy. And so here, this picture is of when I took kids from our school down to another school to play some competitive games with them. My school has more, we're the biggest ALC, so we had more teenagers. No other school has as many teenagers as we do. And so I'm bringing all of these tall, teen boys down who really, if we're playing sports competitively with this other school, we kind of saw who was there, we would outperform them. And it's no fun to play a game where you're just crushing the other team. That's not actually challenging yourself. So we had some of our kids said, hey, we're going to play on the other team and play against them. And, joined the other school's team so that the play could be more competitive. And that, it wasn't about the competition was there to be better for yourself, but not to just plow over the other people. That same group, we had chess tournaments. They played a Smash Brothers video game tournament, and they, all really loved it. And for each individual game, we got to, declare oh, this person won or this person lost. But at the end of the day, there's just all celebrating and, just a general positive community vibe around competition. Other things that I have enjoyed seeing is just the limitless possibilities for, big projects. This is a project of the child that you see in the orange t-shirt there. I think he might be 12 in that picture. He's 16 now. But one of the fathers of a student here, the father who's holding the board in the other picture, he's an architect, and he would come to the school sometimes and just lay out blueprints. And that young, the student would walk by and ask him questions when he was young. And then eventually the father ended up teaching him how to do design with the design software he uses on his computer. And then through that, this young child designed a structure, a treehouse structure that you see that he wanted to build on our property. And, then a team of students got together, kind of using some of the processes that Willie kind of shared, but they, that was their project, and they fundraised for it. They raised, money. They, figured out what materials was needed, got those materials. They built all of this under the oversight of the architect on campus. And now the structure is here. And then what came from that is a really cool apprenticeship that happened between this student and that father, where by the time he was 14 or 15, the father was actually hiring him and paying him for jobs that he was doing for other other projects. And he, he's 17 now and still has a, working relationship with his father. And that, that he has a job waiting for him, when he's 18, should he want to have that. But I just love seeing the, endless possibilities for what can happen with when you just don't have any constraints that you do around, meeting some standards, or, you've got to stop and do X, Y, and Z. Like, this child could actually just dedicate weeks and weeks and weeks to this project, and he could actually leave school and go work with his father. Here's a picture of, I know Lily mentioned the community mastery board. The girl standing in the back here is using one of those. That's the board where you share, anyone can share an awareness they have. Hey, I'm aware that there's a lot of cockroaches in the school building. I really, my underlying need is like cleanliness. I don't really like to have cockroaches around. I propose that we only eat in these 2 rooms of the school building, so that we can really clean those rooms well and make sure that we don't have cockroaches or mice in other parts of the building. So then we kind of try out different, different things to meet the needs and the awareness that was being shared. And I really just love and enjoy seeing kids coming together and being a part of the culture creation. And their lives are the ones that are affected each day with each change. And so encouraging them and giving them space to actually voice, what they want to happen, and, be able to try something out agilely for, a week or so. Sometimes there are proposals made that not everyone is excited about, but when we're not making rules that last forever, when the question is, hey, can we try this out for a week? And if you really don't like it after a week, come back to the next. We do a student circle like this every week to say, come back and share, what you didn't like about it, and we can revise a proposal, and when you kind of iterate that way, it's much easier to get a group of people to say, oh yeah, I can, I'm not really into this idea, but I can try it for a week, and then, think about if it works or not works, and give some accurate feedback about it. This is like a really, really, really simple Kanban board that I use with the youngest students, who are, 5 to 7 here. And, you just kind of see little pictures, and we just meet in the morning, and they love telling me what they want to do. So a lot of these things are, shared by what they want. And this, they don't, interact with it during the day. I'm not expecting a 5 or 6-year-old to do that, but I do like in the morning saying, like, what's possible today? What do you want to have happen? Here are the things that, we're offering that are available to you. Who wants to go to that? And then we just talk about what's, happening this week. And then at the end of the day, we can just meet and say, oh yeah, soccer happened today. Who played that? How was it? What was that like? Do you want to do it again? Someone built a robot today and did Lego robotics with, so-and-so. And what, was it hard? Just to get them engaging in a light way for that cycle of intention, creation, and then reflection, that as they get older, we'd ask for a little more in-depth, the older kids have a more in-depth Kanban board. And one thing that I really love that Willie shared in his presentation before this was, it's people over process. Being agile isn't about tools, it's about the mindset. And so, Kanban is a tool that you can use. And if it's not working, you can try to think of some other way to meet the underlying need, or adjust it or change it. So this is like one way that I just kind of modified a Kanban board down for kids who are 5, 6, 7 years old. The other, thing that I love seeing here at Mosaic is, we're regularly out in the world, using public transportation. What better way to explore using a map than like mapping out a bike route and biking around town to go get pizza for lunch, using, money, actually spending money in the real world, interacting with adults in the real world. Sometimes when I take them out, one thing I'll hear from adults they interact with is, wow, they actually talk to me. They, ask questions. Our kids aren't afraid to talk to other people. That's another piece of feedback I've heard from parents with kids who have decided to, when they're older, move to a conventional school setting, is that Yeah, like my kid speaks up for themselves, and they address things with their teachers, and they can, they just talk, and they don't just kind of shut down. Their expectation is that they're, respected in this world, and that their voice is meaningful and can, should be heard and listened to. I also have taken kids on, really long road trips and had kids helping plan those. I've driven from here up to the, Niagara Falls and the Canada border. And I think it's a really important and special thing to be able to have the kids regularly engaging in the world, in our community, like right here in Charlotte, and then, kind of exploring North Carolina and, wherever we can go. A group of kids even one year went to Puerto Rico on a trip, which was really neat. There's, endless leadership potential here. And this is a play that the student in the blue dress produced and directed. And, we have a lot of student-led offerings, performances, that, these kids have regular opportunities to be able to self-organize and execute, plans. I think that's a muscle that they get to practice all the time. That I think leads them to feel, really empowered in their lives. And then we also, kids can bring in different things that they want. Another, student-led offerings. These kids brought in this mega cyborg ham to build, and they spent hours doing it, and we didn't have any, time constraints on them being able to do that project. They can explore things in depth. They can experience that state of flow. And I really always love the multi-age participation. And then, this one is just, it's a kind of a boring slide, but also there are kids who want to keep in touch, or their families want them to keep in touch with what is covered in conventional settings. And, that's okay. Like these kids have a third grade workbook, and they just spend, 30 minutes a day on it, and the rest of the day they choose everything else. But then what we find is that they can actually, they can do that. There's space for them to do that, and they don't have to sit in a classroom all day. They just kind of keep up, what what's being offered in conventional schools. Here is a online Kanban type board where it's a visual tool that we can get input and support from the whole community to shape what happens here. So, parents at home and kids can add to this board what they're interested in learning, what type of classes they want to have here, and then we can move those classes or those things, through these boards and plan together, get parents involved in planning. So it's, it could be a whole community collaborative effort. But this tool here is used to connect facilitators, students, and parents who all have access to it, who can all edit it, who can all add to it, and coordinate. So there's so many more things that I get to see here. I'll just try to touch on some of them quickly because I know we're out of time. But one thing that I really love is the spaciousness to dive deeply into current events. We're not on any constraint or, have to meet any, deadline for, a test or anything like that. So if there's a social justice issue happening in the greater world or current event going on, we can just actually take the time to talk about it. And also, when conflict arises between kids, which happens all the time, kids who are experiencing conflict or have some hurt or something going on, it's really hard for them to learn anything. You've got to address that first. So we can actually take the time to address conflict as it comes. And, we've got, we try to practice restorative justice here. We also have a lot of authenticity from adults and meaningful, long-lasting relationships. I've known some of these kids who've stayed here for 10 years from when they were 4 to 14. And the way that I'm able to relate with those kids who I've known for so long and, have an impact, like we impact each other's lives, is just really special. I never liked in a conventional setting only getting to be with a group of kids for 1 year, and that's it. It didn't feel enough to me. So, here we can build those relationships over a long period of time. And there's a lot of trust built. Trust takes time to build, and relationships take time to build. And you need more than a year. Social. I'm going to stop the shares here, and I'll just kind of wrap up. Let's see, get here. So just we have, we have that time that we can spend doing, social emotional skills and connecting with others. Those 4 C's of education that Willie shared, those are the most important things that I think takes the time to learn. As I said, earlier, the academics, the book learning, that stuff can be tutored or learned actually really quickly. But learning how to, communicate with others and collaborate, to think critically, to, be creative, to be curious and caring. I wrote those things down on that slide Willie had. Those are the things that actually take a really long time to learn and develop, and that adults still struggle with today. So I think yes, so I'll just go ahead and stop there because I know we have the panel.